On a planet nestled in the distant universe, a group of space explorers embarks on a bold journey to discover dimensions beyond our familiar three-dimensional space. While we comprehend the three spatial dimensions in our world, the concept of four-dimensional space has been vividly depicted in science fiction works. This has ignited hope among many inhabitants of this planet to explore and experience four-dimensional space. In the following story, we delve into the concept of four-dimensional space and the potentials it holds. From basic definitions of spatial dimensions to the distinctions between four-dimensional space and the three-dimensional space we're accustomed to, the narrative guides us through intriguing discoveries about humanity's understanding and exploration of the universe and space. Let's embark on this journey of exploring four-dimensional space and uncovering the fascinating insights it offers. Door to four-dimensional space. As is well known, the world we currently inhabit is a three-dimensional spatial world. Three dimensions are, in our cognition, the lowest dimension constituting the real world. However, in many science fiction works, there are descriptions involving four-dimensional space. This has led many people to anticipate four-dimensional space and to want to enter it to see what it's like there. If you are one of them and want to know what four-dimensional space is like, then you've come to the right place today. After watching this video, you will understand what dimensions are, how many dimensions exist in this world, and what four-dimensional space is like. First, the frequently heard term three-dimensional space and the word dimension in four-dimensional space refer to dimensions. Many people may find the concept of dimensions difficult to understand, but in fact, dimensions simply describe the number of coordinates in a space. In other words, dimensions describe the number of directions present in a space. For example, in one-dimensional space, there is only one direction to move, meaning the entire one-dimensional space is an infinitely long line. If intelligent life existed in one-dimensional space, they would only be able to move along this line, so they would be unable to comprehend the concepts of width and height apart from length. Next, let's add another direction to one-dimensional space and expand it into two-dimensional space. By simply adding a perpendicular line to the line in one-dimensional space, we will obtain a two-dimensional space. In a two-dimensional space with both length and width, if there were intelligent life present, they would only be able to move within a single plane. Thus, they would be unable to grasp the concept of height. If we introduce a line perpendicular to both the length and width within this two-dimensional space, we would then obtain the third dimension, height. That is, we would acquire the three-dimensional space in which humans reside. In three-dimensional space, we can move in three directions: forward, backward, left, right, and up and down. Building upon three-dimensional space, we have the potential to delve into higher dimensions. This paves the way for further exploration beyond the realms of our current understanding. How can we obtain four-dimensional space? In fact, there are two concepts of four-dimensional space. The first one follows the line of thought mentioned earlier simply by considering the directions of length, width, and height, and adding one more direction which is perpendicular to all three of these directions simultaneously, we can obtain four-dimensional space. The other concept of four-dimensional space involves adding a dimension of time to our three-dimensional space. This space is known as four-dimensional space-time. Next, I will provide a detailed explanation of these two concepts of four-dimensional space. First, let's begin with the four-dimensional space that has four directional dimensions. Here, we start by discussing the concept of four-dimensional space with four directional dimensions. If the definition of four-dimensional space includes another direction perpendicular to the length, width, and height, you might wonder why not consider another direction that is perpendicular to these three directions as well. How could that be possible? But please don't forget, if there were intelligent life in a two-dimensional space, they would also find it perplexing to add another dimension perpendicular to length and width. In reality, the number of dimensions present in our world still lacks a definitive answer. String theory posits a total of 10 dimensions, while M-theory suggests the existence of 11 dimensions. Therefore, at least theoretically, four-dimensional space exists. Now, let's employ the three-dimensional brain to try to comprehend what the experience might be like upon entering four-dimensional space. Here, we assume that you can enter four-dimensional space, and within this space, your physical form can remain intact. Upon entering four-dimensional space, the first thing you would notice is your ability to see the interiors of everything, from the inner workings of various machines to the confidential documents in safes, and even the internal organs of the human body, all laid bare before you. Why does this phenomenon occur? We can draw parallels with how two-dimensional beings might perceive the three-dimensional world. Let's try to understand by considering the perspective of creatures in a two-dimensional space when they observe shapes like rectangles, triangles, and circles. Because there is no height dimension, the two-dimensional beings standing next to these shapes would perceive all three shapes appear as a single line. Nevertheless, they cannot perceive the true shape of these figures. However, if they were to enter a three-dimensional space and could move up and down in the height dimension, they would observe things in the two-dimensional space that were previously hidden from view. But undoubtedly, the brains of these two-dimensional beings would struggle to comprehend the nature of the phenomena before them. Similar to the experiences of these inhabitants of the two-dimensional world, when we enter the four-dimensional world, you will see everything in its entirety in four-dimensional space. Those scenes obscured by enclosed spaces in the three-dimensional world will be fully visible in four-dimensional space. Not only that, as we move within four-dimensional space, our movements in three-dimensional space will appear as instantaneous shifts. Let's use the example of two-dimensional space. Imagine a rectangle existing in two-dimensional space. If suddenly it entered three-dimensional space and moved up and down in the height direction, the surrounding two-dimensional inhabitants would notice the rectangle disappearing out of thin air. Then, after some time of movement, when the rectangle returns to its original plane, the inhabitants would observe the rectangle suddenly appearing in another location. The same principle applies when we enter four-dimensional space. After freely moving within it and returning to three-dimensional space to onlookers, this process would seem like us suddenly disappearing and then reappearing elsewhere. It's almost identical to teleportation, and we can use this method to enter and exit any enclosed space at will, be it a bank vault, an iron cage, or a safe. There's no enclosed space that can confine someone who can enter four-dimensional space. Furthermore, we can even use this method to remove tumors from patients without cutting their skin. This space will be so miraculous that it surpasses our imagination. Next, let's take a look at another concept: four-dimensional space-time. If you arrange to meet a friend outside, you need to agree on a meeting point. In other words, you need the latitude, longitude, and altitude. But having just these three coordinates isn't enough. You also need to set a time to arrive at that location. However, in the concept of four-dimensional space-time, besides the three dimensions of length, width, and height, time is considered the fourth dimension. With these four dimensions, we can define any point in this universe within the world we inhabit. While we can freely move in the three dimensions of length, width, and height, we can only move forward in the dimension of time. In other words, we cannot go back to the past. But when ascending a dimension, we can then, in the dimension of time, move freely as well. At that point, we can freely revisit the past or walk into the future. In our lifetime, each of us has made mistakes, big or small, and surely has made various foolish decisions. Some decisions even lead to lifelong regrets. I want to go back to the past and start over again. I want to go back to the past and see my departed loved ones once more. These desires, for those of us living in a three-dimensional world, might be the most extravagant. But in the space-time after ascending a dimension, the words regret won't exist because you can rewrite your history at any time. Whenever you feel dissatisfied with life, you can return to any moment in time and rewrite your life. This space-time is much like a computer game, allowing every player to save at any time to ensure reloading after failure. Of course, both of these scenarios only exist in theory. No matter how much we hope that one day it may become reality, achieving this dimension will still relentlessly pull us forward.